Hi, I'm Daniel Dawson. Welcome to First Pressed. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the senior editor of Olive Oil Times, an olive oil sommelier, and a small producer with an inaugural harvest of about 1,000 liters in 2025. Now, I've spent the past 7 years listening to the smartest people in the industry and reading the research. I'm going to use what I've learned to parse olive oil headlines and help you determine what information is high quality extra virgin and who's pouring rancid lampante. But first, let's have a quick look at what's going on in the olive oil world. The United States Department of Agriculture forecasts olive oil production to fall about 10% in the next harvest. We'll look at their methodology and what producers are saying and seeing in the groves. Olive oil prices at origin keep falling in Spain, and I'll take you through the reasons why. Food Navigator reports that olive oil fraud is growing, but I think their argument is flawed. And European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen says she will meet US President Donald Trump when he has a plan to discuss what that means for olive oil exporters coming later in the show. But let's begin with the latest global oilseed outlook published by the USDA. The folks in the Foreign Ag Service Research Department, who fortunately were not doged, anticipate olive oil production to fall to 3.02 million metric tons in the 2025-26 crop year, which begins in October. This is down from 3.33 million tons last season. If you ask most producers, they will tell you that it is way too early to estimate next year's harvest, and they're correct. Before the first olives are picked in September or October, there is still plenty that could happen in the groves, including extreme weather events or high heat. So with that in mind, how is the USDA making these estimates so early? Well, what the economists at the Foreign Agricultural Service have told me is that they use a combination of market intelligence, historical and cyclical trend data, and assumptions about the weather to make the forecasts, which are updated as the facts change throughout the year. Production is expected to decline in the EU, Turkey, the United States, and about everywhere else. While the forecast doesn't take into account specific country data in the European Union, the steady decline of olive oil prices in Spain indicates that bottlers and cooperatives there expect another good year. This brings us to our next news item. Extra virgin olive oil prices at origin in Spain have fallen by more than half. InfoOliva currently has prices at 3.375 euros per kilogram. In January 2024, prices hit the historic high of 8.988 euros per kilo. This was largely caused by high temperatures in May and June, damaging the olive tree blossoms and preventing a good fruit set. Alvaro Alvaria, the manager of Andalusian cooperative Olio Estepa, told Agropopular that the plentiful winter rain and otherwise favorable conditions have him anticipating a very good harvest next year. I've heard similar things from many of the producers with whom I speak in Spain as well. They said that the rain has refilled many of the reservoirs and that to date the temperatures have been mild. But as I mentioned earlier, producers will have to wait to see how the rest of the spring and the summer plays out in terms of climatic conditions before more concrete estimates can be made. With the combination of another bumper harvest, which I've been told could reach 1.5 to 1.6 million tons in a best case scenario, and the potential for the United States' 10% reciprocal tariffs lowering demand, which remains to be seen, it's not hard to imagine supply meeting or even exceeding demand by the start of the harvest. Assuming both of these factors come to fruition, the only upward pressure on prices that I see in the immediate future is another poor harvest in Italy and some of the excess in Spain being redirected there. Moving on to something different now, Food Navigator published a recent article titled Olive Oil Fraud Grows Globally. Taking aside the article cites 3 examples of fraud from the first 4 months of the year, I read the 2025 Food Fraud Vulnerability Index report on which the article is based, and that's not what the report says. Instead, the report addresses the countries at the highest risk of food fraud and identified olive oil as a common target of food fraud. Now, olive oil fraud articles are always popular in the media, as are the terrible puns in their headlines. However, supply chain tracker Foodikai published its global food fraud index for Q1 2025, which does not show olive oil fraud increasing. So I'm not convinced by this insertion, and I would need to see better reporting before I definitively say olive oil fraud is on the rise. Moving on to something a little bit lighter, we've got a headline in TechCrunch saying that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman doesn't respect olive oil. His sin? Frying with Graz's drizzle when he had a squeeze container of their sizzle at hand. To be frank, there's no issue here. If you've got Sam Altman, I can take 100 times of my investment from OpenAI money, then you can drizzle with any olive oil you like. While I haven't tasted Graz's olive oil, I think it's safe to assume drizzle is early harvest and therefore a bit more expensive, while sizzle is made from more mature olives with higher oil content. Both are fine for frying. The smoke point for early harvest or late harvest is safe for any type of home cooking. This is a non-story, and I'm not sure why TechCrunch is paying someone to write this. Finally, we'll round out with reporting that European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen will not meet with US President Donald Trump until there are concrete details about any prospective trade deal. As a result, the main European exports will continue to face a 10% tariff. Now, this is unlikely to have an immediate effect, as many exporters rushed to get the 2024-25 harvest shipped before the tariffs came into force. Unless there is a deal that exempts olive oil imports from tariffs, which is unlikely in my view, the price increase won't be seen until the end of 2025 and early 2026. While some large producers and their partners may try to shoulder some of the tariff burden, small producers do not have the margin to do this and will in all likelihood raise prices. It's unlikely that this will have a significant impact on US consumption, which remained steady during the inflationary period of 2022 and 23, but it will limit the ability for new household penetration. Well, that's it for me this week. Thank you for joining me. A few housekeeping notes before I go. This is a new project and I'm looking for a co-host to join me in talking about the headlines and discussing the latest news in the olive oil world. I'm also looking for guests to add a 15 to 20 minute interview slot to discuss all things olive oil. If you're interested, please get in touch with me. My email is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you all next week.